Good afternoon and welcome to K2's Road to Excellence with its Excel series with our partner Adagio. This is Alan Salmon and I'm pleased to welcome so many of you to our fifth webinar of the 2018 year. As usual, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Number one, as usual, I will be teaching today in Excel 2016. Not to panic, everything that I do today, you will be able to do in 2013, 2010, and 2007. My good friend Marilyn Benninger is backing me up today, and she is your go-to person for technical problems and for questions. You ask the questions in the chat window, and within 10 days of today, you will all receive access to the recording, my teaching notes, my teaching files, your CPD certificate, and the answers to all of the questions asked and all of the answers. Now, speaking of CPD certificates, 4 times today, Marilyn is going to stop Andrew and myself and put up a polling question. That is a multiple choice question. You don't have to get the answer correct, but you do have to be recorded as answering one of the 4 choices. And that digitally stamps your file, and we know that at that point in time, you are on the webinar. If you answer 75% of the polling questions, you will get a CPD certificate for 1 hour of verifiable CPDs. If not, it'll be 1 hour of non-verifiable. So today's topic is something hugely important, and that is Excel tables. So before we get started, Marilyn, it's time to see where the folks are at. Can we have the first poll, please?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. So we've launched our first poll. I'd like to get a sense of who's in the room. And if you've used tables in Excel before, please select the one that's closest to your experience. A flat out no, I haven't. Maybe you've heard about them, not used them. Maybe you use them, or maybe you're a tables ace and couldn't live without them. That's the category that Alan is in. We close our polls when we hit 90%, and we're just about there. So I'm going to count you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And now I'm going to be sharing those results with everyone. What do you think of that, Alan?
Just about what I figured. So my challenge is to get all of you, not to the ACE level, although I'll tell you at the end how you could get to the ACE level. So let's get started. So what the heck are we talking about when we talk about Excel tables? Because we all lay out our stuff in columns and rows, and technically that's a table. But way back in Excel 2007, Microsoft introduced the concept of an Excel table that is really somewhat like an Access database. Now, why would you want to change your layout to an Excel table? Well, number one is the point that a number of people made in the answer to the polling question, and that is the ease of use of table styles. It's remarkably easy to do the formatting. Secondly, auto expansion, the ability to add columns and rows and have the range automatically update when you do that. Next is formula replication, the ability to create a formula, and when you enter it, it replicates either all the way down the column in a table or all the way across the row. Hugely useful. And then sorting and filtering. Sorting is basically the same in both a table and the way we normally do it, but filtering gains a lot of additional functionality, and we'll get into that. And then there's a language, not really a programming language, but a language for how we create formulas in tables, and that's called structured referencing. and I will give you a taste of that. And then finally, the ability to deal with duplicate data. So on that note, let's get started, and let's go here. Now, there's nothing magic about what you see on the screen. It's laid out in columns and rows, and a lot of people will call this a table, and I can't argue with them. It's a fairly large one. It's 18,000 rows, but that's irrelevant. And by the way, for those of you that don't know how I did this, the way I got to the bottom is, or the way I'm going to get to the top is touch the top of the cell boundary for cell 18271, and I get the four-headed arrow, and I double click, and there we go. Now, what's the difference between this and this? Well, the difference is this is an Excel table, and you can't see any difference in this one versus what I showed you before, other than two things. The formatting, and you notice that the drop downs are already there. But there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, and that's where we're going in the next 20 odd minutes. So to get started, let's deal with this table. And again, it's not quite as large, but it's significantly, it's got, well, 2,611 rows. And as I said, that's irrelevant. So the first step in creating the table is very simple. I need to click anywhere inside the table boundaries from here all the way down to the bottom right. And you'll see the reason why in a moment. Then I need to be on the Home tab, and I go over here and click Format as Table. Well, that's kind of cool. There's a whole bunch of styles. Well, green for hopefully spring coming. I'll select that one. Now, here's the key to why you want to be inside the table when you start. Excel asks the question, where is the data for your table? And it says, I think it's A1 to I2611, and that's right. My table does have headers. So I click, and bingo, we're done. We now have a table. So what's the big deal? Well, I've decided that in column J, I want a total. So I'm going to call this EOW, end of week, total, or totals. Now watch what happens when I hit enter. Well, that's kind of cool. Notice that it copied the formatting down. So we'll go down to the bottom right-hand corner. And notice the backward L in the bottom right-hand corner at J whatever. If I did an undo, you would find that that backward L is here. So what that means is not only has it copied the formatting, it's expanded the boundaries of the cell, of the table. And that would apply, as I'll show you in a bit, if I added rows. So now let's go up here. And I'm going to make this wider. And I'm actually going to make these wider for what I'm going to do next. There we go. So I want the sum from Sunday to Saturday. Well, that's pretty easy to do in Excel. All I'm going to do is go up here to the auto sum and do my magic by double clicking. Wow. Understand what it did here. It created the formula and then it replicated it all the way to the bottom. Well, that saved about 30 seconds of work. And now let's go up here to the ribbon and notice above the Design tab, I now have a Table Tools tab. I'm going to click on it and notice the ribbon has changed because everything now is dealing with table features. And over here, if I click on that down triangle, I see a whole bunch of styles, as Excel calls it. And there's some light ones, and there's some medium ones, and there's some dark ones. And watch what happens if I hover over one. Well, I'm going to select that one. And it's very easy to change it. Now, if you like cruel and unusual punishment, you can go down here and create a new table style. And to do that, you've got to set the formatting for all of these items. And I'll let you in on a little secret. I have never, ever, ever created a custom table style. That's way too much work. Now, I don't know why, but up here there's a checkbox that says filter buttons and bye-bye filters. And I don't know why you would want to do that, so we'll turn it back on. And then we can adjust the formatting in the actual table. So if I click on first column, notice that it turned the first column bold and dark green. And if I click on last column, it's done the same thing there. Now that doesn't really do much for me, but watch what happens when I click on banded columns. And notice now that every other column is a different color, and then that's called banding. And I do that once in a while to make things stand out, but I typically prefer banded rows. However, if you didn't, click and bye-bye. Click and on again. Now let's go over here to the table name. When you create a table for the first time in any Excel workbook, it automatically defaults to table 1. Next one will be table 2 and table 3. And you don't have to do anything with that, but I prefer to make it something relevant. So I'm going to call this sales, and we'll see how that's used in just a minute. All right. Now there's one other checkbox here that I really like, and that's the total row. So when I click on that checkbox, the screen's going to jump to the very bottom. And I'm going to widen that to there. Now, one of the things that Microsoft hasn't discovered, apparently, is that most accountants and bookkeepers, including me, would like the totals for all the columns. Well, they haven't done that. So this is a big challenge. I'm going to copy and paste. And there we go. I'm not going to open it up. Let's go to the top. And let's look at this formula for the first time. When I show you this formula, you would expect it to say equal sum bracket C2 colon F2. But it doesn't. It's got this weird terminology. Equal sum bracket sales square bracket at square bracket sun square bracket colon square bracket Saturday, and so on. And that is an example of what we call structured referencing. And once you get used to it, it's a very, very powerful tool. And what that says when you analyze the nomenclature there is add up all the numbers in the sales table in the current row, which is what the @ sign is, from Sunday to Saturday. Now let's go down to the bottom and let's look at the total. And again, a weird nomenclature. Now this time, notice that it didn't use sum, it used subtotal. Because Excel knows, and I know, and I suspect a number of you know, that if you do a sum on a filtered deck, you get the total for both the filtered rows and the unfiltered rows, which is not what you usually want. So using subtotal, it will only show the amount for the visible cells. And then we get this weird 109. What the heck is that? Well, there's different ways we can do a subtotal. We can do a subtotal on a count, subtotal on max, min, then the mean, and so on. And the numbers 1 to 12 have a particular meaning in the Excel lexicon. It happens that 9 is the lexicon for a sum. And 109 means do it as a subtotal. So do a subtotal of all the visible cells in the end of week totals column. All right, let's undo that and let's go to another cool feature. Our tables, probably a lot, tend to grow. So let's see what happens if I add this to the bottom of the table. We'll do a copy and we'll do a paste. Notice that the backward L is on cell end of week total 2611. And now we do a paste. Wow. Now it's done three things. Notice that now my backward L is at row 2621, meaning it expanded the table down to the added rows. Secondly, it formatted them according to the table format. And number three, it automatically added the total. Hugely powerful tool. All right, let's move on now to filtering and sorting. And again, I got to quickly create a table. And there we go. Okay, so up here, we have the drop downs. And there's two ways in a table to do a sort. One is to go to the home page and go over here and do a sort and filter. The second is to do the sort directly from the drop down. So I want to sort A to Z. Well, that's interesting. Now, some of you probably, without taking another shot, think you need to highlight the entire table before you do a sort. And as I've just proved to you, that is not the case. If I'm anywhere in the column where I want to sort, and I go here, and I go sort Z to A, it automatically sorts that from Z to A, and also includes, of course, the adjacent columns. Without that, we'd have garbage. But there's nothing new on that for most of you. So let's go to text filters. And notice our choices: equals, does not equal, begins with, ends with, contains, and so on. So I'm going to do begins with. And I'm going to do begins with C. And by the way, this is not case sensitive. And there we go. Now, I can expand this into a more advanced mode and use Boolean Logic, which means I'm going to use an and or an or. So I'm going to go to text filters, and I'm going to go to begins with, and I'm going to click again begins with B. Now, do you all understand that this will generate no responses? Because there's no way a word can start with a C and start with a B. However, if I change this to or, I'm saying, show me all the C starts and the B starts. And there we go. You're going to need to see a B to convince me that I did it right. And I didn't do it right. Oh, yes, I did. There we go. All right, let's move on now and look at filtering numbers. So we'll go over here to here. And I could just say, show me those three. And there we go. Not very useful. However, this is incredibly useful. I go to number filter and notice the choices I've got, and I'm not going to bother reading them out. You can do that. So I'm going to pick my favorite one, and that is the top 10. So here we go. I could do the top 10 or the bottom 10. I'm going to do top 10. And if I don't want 10, I could bring it down or I could increase it. But I'm happy with 10. Now, I got a problem here because I didn't clear out this one. So I'll select all on the text box, and there's our top 10. Hugely useful. And then to end my session, I want to go here. Not to end it, but almost to end it. And this is this fairly large database, 2617. In Maryland, I wish I had the opportunity here for people, so I could see people's hands and that, because I'm going to ask what, well, apparently is a dumb question. Traditional practices in an Excel worksheet is to put your totals in the bottom or at the bottom. But once in a while, I'll put them at the top, because if I got a million rows and I want to see the total, I don't want to have to go down to row a million. So in here, I am going to put the total formula. And in the interest of time, I'm going to copy it and paste it. And I got to take off this to get rid of the text. Come on. There we go. So we'll widen it out. And let's look at the formula. And again, it's going to be a structured reference. Equals subtotal 9 weekly, meaning I wanted to do a sum, weekly sales table, and the end of week totals. So now I'm going to copy that down to here. And we got the same thing. But I'm going to go up here and I'm going to change the 9. And when I do that, there is the description of the numbers that I need to use. So 1 is average, 2 is count, 3 is count A, 4 max, and so on. And notice 9 is sum. Well, I want the average there. So all I've got to do is change the 9 to a 1. And there we go. And there's another example of structured referencing. And by the way, as usual, you're going to get a handout and my teaching files that makes all that I'm doing today in the table world meaningful for you. So now let's go to the last bit of tables over here. And this isn't large, but I suspect that there are duplicate numbers in column C, and I have no idea where they are. Now I could sort them, but instead of doing that, if I went to data, I could go remove duplicates, and it would remove all of the duplicates. Unfortunately, when you do that, you don't know what they deleted. So instead of doing that, I'm going to use a function that's available inside and outside the table. And I'm going to go up here and click on numbers. And this is not the time and the place, but what I've done is told Excel to remember that when I click on number, I want it to highlight all the numbers that are in this column. And then I'm going to go to here and I could remove the duplicates again here from within the table, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to go to Conditional Formatting. And I'm going to highlight the cell rules. I don't want greater than, I want duplicate values. And Excel is saying if there's a duplicate value in there, Excel is going to highlight it with large red fill and dark red text. Okay. Now I have no idea if there are any or not until I do this. Whoops, there we go. But that's too much work. So the final step is to go here, and we'll do it this way. Go to Sort, and notice this time, Sort by color, and Sort by cell color. Well, that's kind of cool. There we go. And that, ladies and gentlemen, completes my 25 minutes. So Marilyn, it's time to look ahead to 2 weeks from today for my last poll.
Thank you, Alan. And while I'm doing that, I'll just share with you the accolades that I've been receiving through the question box. People are so excited the stuff they're learning today. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, everybody.
So folks, this is our last Excel polling question. It's about charts. If you could please select one. How do you feel about charts in your reports? No, I can't be bothered. I don't understand them. I use them every once in a while, or you use them extensively. Questions aren't hard, but we sure do appreciate your feedback. It helps us to identify that you were in the room for the webinar. We've just passed 90%. Thanks very much. I'm going to be closing in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm sharing the results with you now, Alan.
And again, that fits into the pattern. So this is a lead in to what I'm going to do, as I said, for week Tuesday. And now, Marilyn, it's time to do the handoff to my good friend Andrew Bates for his session.
Happy to do that. All right, Andrew, I'm just making you the presenter. I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
I also need to unmute myself on my phone. It's like
it's always something.
Okay, there's always something, yes. Well, that was great. I learned something new. I'm always looking for duplicate data. So I learned that neat trick at the end. That was new for me. Just goes to show that you can't, there's never an opportunity to stop learning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Adagio. This is the last time that I'm going to be talking about this. We have a 3-part series here. Well, I have to be clear, it's probably not the last time I'm going to be talking about Adagio, but this topic has been about Adagio specifically for accountants, and we've talked about fundamentals, the user interface, and things like that. We've talked about the GL. I'll do a brief review, and today we're going to talk about Adagio Cloud because we're one of the few accounting software providers that allows both an on-premise and a cloud deployment. So we'll talk very specifically about that today, but we'll start with a kind of brief review of what Adagio is. Some of you have not heard of Adagio at all, and some of you, I'm sure, have not heard of Adagio. It's always a bit of a surprise to me, though, as we've been selling and supplying Adagio since 1999, so 18 years now we've been on the market. Just to let you know, we're a Vancouver-based software development company. We've been in business over 30 years. We have always supplied accounting solutions to small organizations and not-for-profits. We have specialized solutions for wholesale distribution, which include a very powerful purchase order solution that manages landed costs, inventory with 5 separate costing methods, average, LIFO, FIFO, user standard costing, and user-defined costing. Time and billing for professional practices like landscape architects and engineers. And what else? Very powerful customized reporting, including in the general ledger, a complete spreadsheet-based financial reporter with all of the computational horsepower of Excel and most of its formatting. So the thing that differentiates Adagio from the entry-level products like Sage 50 and QuickBooks is that we're batch-based. Now, we know that if you're in public practice, a lot of you are using either Sage 50 or QuickBooks to do your client write-up. But one of the problems with doing that is that those products are not actually designed for doing client write-up. They're designed to run small businesses with a small accounting department, often a part-time accounting department. You would find if you were doing your client write-up in Adagio that there are some big benefits about using a modular accounting system where there's a separate module for GL and another one for AR and another one for AP. First of all, it's really easy to do combined or departmental financial statements without having to go to Excel. Many of the people who have been attending this Excel workshop are doing so because specifically they want to improve their facility with Excel because they spend so much time in that product. It is, after all, the most popular accounting module on the planet. It's the module that everyone uses when their accounting software doesn't actually do what they would like it to do. We have very powerful customized reporting that allows you to put specialized reports on people's desktops. As organizations get larger, there's often a need to expose the accounting data to people like perhaps the purchasing manager or the shipping clerk, and you want to expose the accounting data to them without actually giving them access to the accounting software. And Adagio's custom reporting solutions allow you to put specialized reports on someone's desk without giving them access to the accounting. I would also say that the majority of Adagio sites have more than one person in the accounting department. In my experience, I know I have a very youthful voice, but I've been doing this a long time. You can make almost any accounting product work in any organization if it's just you in the accounting department. If you know the reports you're trying to get to and the coding you have to enter in order to get to those reports, and you enter all the transactions, you almost never make a mistake. Even when you do make a mistake, you can remember the transaction that's likely the cause of the problem. So what happens, though, is you get overwhelmed by the transaction volume as organizations grow, and then you have to rely on other people to enter the data properly. And that can be difficult when they hit the post button, the transaction is posted all throughout the accounting software. It can be hard to track down problems at the end of the month. Batches allow you to check someone's work before it gets posted. We have a few features specifically designed for the not-for-profit and First Nation space. Over a third of our installs are in that space because they're subject to external audit. They often have very specialized financial reporting needs. They're doing operational statements on a monthly basis. They manage their organization using the financial statements that they produce. The kind of, we'll touch a little bit on the features that make Adagio nice in that space. And from a audit point of view, one of the nicest things that Adagio lets you do is drill down all the way on a financial statement. You can drill down from a number on a financial statement all the way down to the balance journal entry. And from that journal entry, you can see the original source document. If you attach an invoice in accounts payable or you generate an invoice in accounts receivable, we will automatically attach that transaction, that image of the transaction, to the transaction in Adagio, and we will flow that all the way through the accounting system. We also automatically attach documents that are related. So when you write a check to pay a collection of invoices, we will generate a remittance advice for the check and automatically attach all of the paid invoices to that remittance advice. And even the person who is working in the financial reporter, if they click on the credit to bank, will be able to see not only the remittance advice for the check, but all the invoices that were paid with that check. Of course, Caseware has such a presence in Canada. We have a direct import to Caseware. So if you have a client that's using Adagio, you can just pull all their transactions into Caseware to do your working papers and year-end analysis and audit analysis. Let's see. Why do we like batches? Well, mostly we like them because they allow you to train new people in the accounting department without worrying about, with the ability to be able to check the work before it gets posting. It makes it very easy to train. It gives you a natural checking point, so you have increased control over the transactions that are being entered. You can produce a batch listing. You don't actually have to produce it to paper. You can just PDF the batch listing. There's a GL summary at the end of every batch listing that allows you to make sure that the proper GL accounts have been allocated to. There's posting journals, which are automatically generated and filed in a logical filing sequence so that you can go and review the posting journal. The majority of posting journals can be reprinted at any time during the year if you need to go back and do some analysis. Businesses actually move to a batch environment naturally. If they take credit cards, they have a closed batch process. At the end of the day, it's useful for them to be able to check the cash receipt batches in accounts receivable and make sure that the cash receipts from credit cards tie to the credit card processor's batch at the end of the day. Bank deposits are really a batch of checks that are deposited into the bank. They may get time sheets coming in, which are a batch of time allocations. It's very useful to be able to enter those time sheets into a batch before they get allocated to projects. And also, in my experience, engineers really don't pay a lot of attention to the projects that they're allocating time to, and it's very useful to have someone whose job it is to check that information before the stuff gets posted. The financial reporter, the general ledger has a user-defined chart of accounts. We believe account numbers are significant and important. You can adding an account into your general ledger does not automatically put it on a financial statement in any particular place unless you have set up your financial statements to do that. But the financial statement layout is completely independent of your chart of accounts. So you can put any GL account anywhere on a financial statement and do math on it. We support both 12 or 13 fiscal periods, plus we have a year-end adjustment period. So if you have a client who's in retail that does 445 fiscal accounting, oh yes, and unlike the real-time posting of transactions in QuickBooks and Sage 50, you can allocate a transaction to a fiscal period, which is different than that of the date of the transaction. So for those of you who are accountants who know that you're trying to match revenue and expenses, you know that the date of a transaction is not necessarily the fiscal period to which it should be allocated, and Adagio supports that for you. It supports it not only in the general ledger, but also down at the subledger phase. So if you have closed a period in the general ledger and someone tries to enter a transaction to that period, they can choose a different accounting date from the actual date of the transaction. To make sure that people aren't posting to accounts you don't want them to post to, you can mark accounts inactive, which will just mean that when that transaction comes into the GL and attempts to post, it'll be dropped into an error batch so you can decide what to do about the GL account. You can close specific periods in your GL to make sure that people are no longer posting transactions to that period because you finished with the financial statements and they've gone to the board and the bank. You can prevent posting from an unexpected source to make sure that someone in AP doesn't inadvertently post a transaction to a revenue account or vice versa, or someone in the GL does not do a journal entry to the AR control account. So lots of ways to make sure that people don't make mistakes. We have 2 budget figures, and you can open next year's budgets without opening next year. So you can start doing budget entry for your next fiscal year without worrying about people inadvertently posting transactions there. You can lock the budgets once they've been approved by the board of directors. You can import figures into your budgets, and the budgets are on a period-by-period basis, but you can just import an annual budget, and we'll automatically allocate that over the 12 or 13 fiscal periods in the GL. We support an account department structure, so you don't have to have departments, but if you do have departments, and in a not-for-profit in First Nation, you often have many departments. You can have as many as you want. Departments' budgets departments can have their own budget. You can do departmental financial statements that compare actual against budget. You can close a single department to a separate retained earnings account, and you can close one department and then another and then another. You don't have to close your entire GL all at the same time. And when you're finished with a department, you can mark it inactive to make sure that no one is posting to that department in the future or going forward. We have a nice soft year end. We still have an explicit year end so that you can say, no, I am finished with the year and I want you to prevent people from inadvertently entering transactions to the prior year. But you can post transactions to the prior year so that when the accountant brings back the year-end adjustments, and there's always year-end adjustments, you can easily post those to the prior year and update the retained earnings account. There's a specific closing period for the year-end adjustments so that your year-end adjustment don't distort your final year's your final period's operational statements. And finally, our financial reporter is spreadsheet based. As I said before, you can do all sorts of kinds of math on the financial reporter. You can post statistics into the general ledger. So patient day in a hospital, or liter of gas pumped in a gas station, or board foot of lumber produced in a lumber mill, or square footage in a retail environment. So you can do revenue per square foot, or available room in a hotel, so you can do revenue per available room calculations right on the operational statements. The financial reporter is a full spreadsheet. It understands new accounts from account ranges. You can do drill down all the way to a balanced journal entry. And there are document links as well. I think at this stage it would be useful if I just showed you briefly what the general ledger looks like. I'll launch the Adagio general ledger here. Now, as organizations get bigger, you need a security model. There's a full security model in Adagio so that you can make sure that people are only doing the things that they're authorized to do. You can say that this person can enter batches but not post them. You can say that this person can look at financial statements but not change them. Here we're looking at the chart of accounts. We're looking at the balances as at a particular period. You'll notice that we have budget and forecast figures. Those are the two budget buckets. Every grid in Adagio is customizable so that you can show particular columns that are useful to you. So for customers and vendors, you can show their balance outstanding or their 30, 60, 90-day aging. The columns are customizable on a user-by-user basis. I think it's interesting to show there's an Excel direct button here. On every grid that you see in Adagio, you'll see a little button with an old Excel 2003 logo, since we've had this feature for a long time. But if you were looking at the transactions that have gone through the bank account. So these are all the transactions that have gone through my bank account. And if you click on the Excel Direct button here, if I click on the Excel button, you would see, well, okay, it's a little hard to see. You would see that we drop all of the data that you're looking at into Excel, and you'll notice that it's formatted as a table with subtotals down at the bottom, so that you can see that you can see the debits and credits for the transactions that are being listed. But if you wanted to see all the checks that had been written to Karen, you could say, show me all the checks that have Karen in the description. Oh, I guess we didn't write any checks to Karen here. Contains, how about Ron? That's interesting. Someone's changed my sample data on me. So I can look at, maybe I just want to see the cash receipts, or I want to see cash receipts over $10,000. So I can, as Alan showed, I can say I would like to see all the cash receipts where the amount, the debit amount, is over $10,000. So since Excel, it's so common to need data in Excel, we have put the Excel button on all the grids in Adagio. So you can easily get data out into Excel if you have to do some analysis, or analysis of a clearing account, for example, or bank reconciliation, or analysis of vendor paying history, that kind of stuff. Bring back my PowerPoint here. Here we go. Yes, I'll just hop across to the financial reporter just to show you the financial reporter has the way the financial statements are set up. This financial statement has a column for revenue, month to date for the current period. If I change the period, the numbers all change. If I change a department and see this for a particular department, I'm seeing just the numbers for this department, or this range of departments, or an individual department. All departments ending in 0. You can slice and dice your figures any way you want, and I can see a consolidated total. To add, if I wanted to add last year's numbers on here, I'll just duplicate the column and change the specification to last year, and now I have all of last year's numbers here. Or I could put this year's budget in the column and do math on the two columns. And if I'm looking at a particular number, such as office expenses, and I think, oh, that's an interesting number. I don't. Seems a little high. I can double click on a number in the financial statement and drill down to the accounts and departments that went into that, and then look at a particular account department and see the transactions that were posted for 169.14, and then I can look at a particular transaction and see the balance journal entry. If I go across to this is the balance journal entry of that transaction. A couple of things. You'll see the Excel Direct button is here, so if you need to drop this into Excel to email it off to someone, you can do that. And you'll notice that there's a view button attached to this transaction. If I want to see the invoices that generated from which this transaction was generated, I can click on the view button, and this is the invoice that was posted in the accounts payable. So this saves a ton of time asking the quick question of the accounts payable department or whoever was entering the transactions. Okay, so we support deployments of Adagio either on-premise or in cloud. So cloud has some advantages. So the first one, usually from an accounting point of view, is that there's no capital expense. You don't have to buy perpetual licenses. You don't have to have a server, really. You just need a router in a closet. You don't need which means that your IT support is much simpler. In many organizations, the local area network is being maintained just for the accounting department. They're the only department where multiple people need access to the same data. You can get to the data from anywhere, so anywhere that you have an internet connection, you can get to your accounting data, and that's a big benefit. But the problem with cloud, there are some disadvantages on cloud, especially in the accounting space. So one of the disadvantages is that often the software developer decides when upgrades occur, and that can be very disruptive if you're in the middle of an audit or a year end or something like that. Another question that comes up is who holds the data. If your data is sitting on some vendor's server and you have an argument with them, they hold a huge asset of yours hostage. Another thing is that the person, if you acquire a cloud-based entry-level product, you just kind of sign up and you're on your own to figure out how to make this accounting software work within your organization and operational parameters. So that can be a problem. And perhaps the most major one is that the cloud version is different from on-premise. So those are problems that we've identified, and I'll just talk briefly about how Adagio has address those concerns. Before I do so, I am curious to know whether, for those of you who are in the audience, whether you prefer a cloud on-premise or other type of deployment for the software that you're selecting today. So here's a very quick survey poll. Do you prefer doing deployments on-premise, or do you prefer a cloud deployment? Now, many of you are thinking about cloud deployments. I would point out you're almost certainly using cloud applications already. Just your bank is a cloud deployment. Your bank application is a cloud department. But your accounting may not be, and it's interesting. Okay, so we've got our responses over. I'll just give a few more seconds for a few more people to vote. Okay, and I'll close the poll now, just to and share the results with you, so that you can see that. Interestingly enough, almost half of you still prefer an on-premise deployment, and personally, I think that will change over time. In the same way that we don't, in most places, we don't generate our own power now. We rely on a hydro company to generate our power. Used to be couple of years ago, well, not a couple of years ago, 100 years ago, when you built a factory, you either had to build it by a stream for a water wheel, or you had to have your own electrical engineers and an engineer building power. And I think that will change as computational horsepower is available, not just at the plug in a room, but wirelessly. If you find we're looking at the Olympics with 5G in the phone, they're now talking about gigabit wireless connections. So high-speed internet is coming. We do understand, since we are installed at a lot of First Nations, that may be some way off if you're in remoter portions of Canada, and we do run, when we're installed on premise, we do run without an internet connection, but in total, I think you'll see that people will be moving to a cloud deployment. So this is a screenshot of the GL on the desktop, and this is GL in the cloud. It's exactly the same software. It's got the same data. It's got the same, you're running the same versions. So on the desktop, Adagio looks like this, and in cloud, it looks like this. You'll notice the cloud version has an Excel Direct button. When you click on the Excel Direct button in Adagio Cloud, we launch a desktop version of Excel, and we put the data in your desktop version. of Excel for speed of manipulation, and so that you can be comfortable that you have control of the data. Every Adagio module has a backup menu choice. You can elect to back up your data to your local hard disk or shared volume on your local area network. So you can actually pull the data out of Adagio Cloud and back it up locally. So you can move from cloud to an on-premise deployment or from on-premise to cloud with a minimum of disruption. The basic functionality of cloud includes GL, AP, and bank reconciliation. So that's core, and that's what a not-for-profit may be the minimum that they use. They may be funded by a granting agency, so they don't really have an accounts receivable. They're not invoicing anybody for anything. They just need powerful financial reporting for their various stakeholders, their board of directors, their bank, their public statements, their general managers, operational managers, but there are invoicing and inventory and job costing modules available. We license by concurrent users in cloud, which is a different licensing model than on-premise. So the licensing is a little bit different. One of the nicest things in Adagio, if you're responsible for the accounting department, is that the administrator has control over when upgrades get installed. The administrator desktop shows the administrator what updates are available for the software that they're running. So there's a separate menu choice, as you can see on the right, of the updates that have been released that are not yet installed, and you can just double click on one of those updates to install that, so you can install it at your convenience. We do not control the installation. The administrator creates companies. So you can have multiple companies. If you're an accountant doing bookkeeping for many different companies, you can store them all separately. You can give the company itself access to look at the data that you're entering for them and the financial statements that you prepare for them. You assign permissions to users. There's a tight security model within Adagio Cloud. You can say these people only have access to these companies, or these people only have access to these modules. So there's a by company, by module overriding security model within Adagio Cloud. So if you're a user, you lose all of that panel with the updates that are available, and all you get to see is the companies that you have been given access to and the modules that you've been given access to within those companies. There is, of course, sample data so that you can play around on so if you want to explore how something works in a database that is not your own, we have a sample data that's installed with every module, and you can refresh the sample data if you want to start at a known location. But the sample data demonstrates many of the features and functions that are available within Adagio. And I just noticed that someone noticed that our sample data is in the past. You have to choose your sample data's dates, and you can either have it well off into the future or in the past, and we elected to put our sample data in the past, partly because that saves us having to update the demo date whenever we're doing a presentation. It's also possible to launch Adagio with a specific session date to make sure that the transactions that you are entering are for perhaps your year-end or a month-end closing period. So I noticed that the clock is just sweeping up to 1 minute to 10. I have one more poll question that I'd like to share with you. And that's mostly about if you are looking at deployments, cloud deployments for the accounting software, are any of these issues a concern? I will also say for Adagio Cloud, we have hosting services on both sides of the 49th parallel for those of you who want to make sure that your data is resident in Canada. You may have organizational requirements that be so we can host it either side of the 49th. And for those of you who have had experience with cloud deployed accounting software where any of these issues a concern for you. So we've just come up to the last minute. This is a good poll to make sure that you're all paying attention to the very end of the hour. And what I'll do is I'll close this poll and just share it with you. It's interesting that security seems to be the highest issue. Adagio Cloud is deployed with a small add-in. We are not browser-based, so you cannot get to the accounting just with a regular browser. You must have a small component installed on the computer that you're going to use to access it. But of course, that component can be on a laptop, and then once you have access to high-speed internet, you have access to your accounting data. So, Marilyn, I think that's that is my time for the day. It's 10 o'clock here in Vancouver. If you want to resume control, go ahead, and you have the floor. There we go.
Thank you, Andrew. Alan, we can see your PowerPoint slide if you'd like to finish us up for today.
Thank you, Andrew. And just for your edification and the audience, I'm 75% through analyzing the data from the survey, and the 2,500 responses basically mirror the kind of responses you got this morning. And on that note, a reminder that within 10 days, you'll get the recording, my notes, my teaching files, the answers to the questions that you've asked, and your CPD certificate. Now, when we close the webinar, you will again be asked to fill out a short survey, and this time we've got the questions right. The last question asks you whether you would like more in-depth training via webinar for the data table stuff. I only gave you about 25% of what there is to learn. So if you check that, we'll get back to you. And on that note, it's a wrap. Thank you all.